we have with us faculty from school, Professor Savita Singh and uh, G. Uma ma'am with us. So, ma'am, you can start.
So,
Thank
good afternoon, everybody. I'm Savita Singh here. I'm so glad that this session is going on. The students have been inquiring about counseling, about getting in touch with us, uh, understanding the course, the program, everything. So, we have an opportunity to talk to them. I thought that, and I discussed this with Dr. Uma, so, trying to give you all an overview of the second year syllabus in terms of courses and units and blocks and all that, and also topics, because I want all of you to understand that entire program. It is in a holistic manner. First year, of course, we are in first year at the moment, so you will be studying in depth the first year material. But second year also, you should know how it is extended beyond what you will study this year. In the second year, it will get more and more, there will be a certain kind of height and depth added to the program. So in the second year, the first course is MGSC 001, Gender Planning and Development Policies. You have seen that in the first year, there's a brief kind of a discussion about planning and policies. Here we have gender planning and development policies as practiced by practitioners and by the government. So the block one, that is to say the book one, talks about traditional and emerging planning methodology. So, just talking about planning something is one thing, but planning in terms of making policies and implementing policies is a completely different process. And you will be studying in a very serious manner as to how, if you want to make transformation in the society, you want to take the issue of inequality, gender inequality seriously. These are some of the ways by which this inequality is addressed so that we have a fair society and equitable society. So the traditional and emerging planning methodology, which is a block one of first course of second year, MGSC 001, Gender Planning and Development Policies. The Unit 1 discusses planning, historical perspectives and methodologies, critical review of planning methodologies, earlier ways of planning. India entered into, India became a modern state, and very soon it embarked on the path of planned economy. That is to say, we had planning commissions, 1, 2, 3, 4 year wise planning used to take place, 5 year plans, 3 years plans, 2 years plans. All the investment in various kinds of policies. Uh, Also direction given to what kind of policies one should make. All of that happened not because somebody thought that this is a good idea. No, it happened at the level of bureaucracy on a more enduring basis. And the planning commission was there to overview, to assess. Planning commission has many used to have many committees, standing committees, where matter would go and the money will be allocated. Planning commission was basically a planning and fund allocating agency. So then that that phase in which India planned its economy in such a way that the entire economy was planned. But here we are talking about planning and policy implementation according to the methodology of gender. Entrance of gender into the consciousness of planning changed everything in terms of how we make policies, in terms of how we, in fact, go about planning. The unit 3 is need for gender planning. Then you have block 2, which is book 2, gender planning, characteristics and issues. Characteristics of gender planning. What is gender planning basically? Goals, objectives, and agenda for gender planning. Meeting practical and strategic gender needs for planning. This is a very important thing, because this distinction between practical and strategic gender needs uh, is the point where two kinds of needs were identified. So one need to alter the basic unequal structure of society. The other one is to take care of inequality and its manifestation on daily basis. So uh, these two distinctions made it very clear that not only we go and make structural changes, not that we uh, take care of day-to-day inequalities existing in society, but that we go and look at the basic structure, how structures themselves build inequality in our lives. So in book two, unit 7 is gender planning and implementation process and organizational structures. So until unless you have a structure to support what you want to do, you will not be able to implement it. In block 3, gender planning framework, there are many ways by which you actually plan your economy, you plan your society, you plan transformation of your society. All these things are the frameworks are very important also to understand. So gender planning tools and introduction, then unit 10 approaches to gender planning procedures, unit 11 is gender planning practices, and unit 12 is gender sensitive planning versus gender planning. Okay, gender sensitive planning versus gender planning. This is also again a distinction that has been introduced here, which makes all the difference to our way of studying planning, gender planning. Then MGSC 002, uh, another course, gender audit and gender budgeting. These are all serious matters, basically. So, genesis of gender budgeting, global scenario, and Indian initiatives. Unless you have a budget, your plan cannot be supported. You need, because everything that you make, policies that you make, there's got to be an investment to implement them. So gender budgeting is very important. For which kind of gender issues, what kind of money is required? That is what gender budgeting is about. So block 1 is genesis of gender budgeting, global scenario and Indian initiative. Unit 1, genesis and introduction to gender budgeting. Evolution of gender budgeting, global scenario. Indian initiative, tools and methodologies. Primer of performance budgeting and women's component plan and gender budgeting. The unit 6 of NGSC 002 is extremely important because gender budgeting started in India with the introduction of women's component plan, and then it changed everything for as far as government is concerned for their gender policies. Block 2 of MGSC 002, paradigm shift in 5-year plans from gender neutral to gender positive approaches. Social audit and gender auditing, then framework of gender auditing, gender audit, good practices and experience of gender audit. And in block 3, gender budgeting policies, strategies for empowerment. So why do we do all these things? To empower the disempowered species, the disempowered group of people who happen to be women. So in block 3, you have unit 10 in engendering public economics. So clear understanding is to the money belongs not just to some section of people, but to the entire country, to people of all kinds of marginalities and deprivations. Then revenue and expenditure budget, union budget, state budgets, building budget from below, local self-government budgets. All the administrative structures at all levels, the money that was sent to them or given to them or acquired by them to spend, they were all then included in this gender budgeting procedure. And money could not be spent on women and children without proper budgeting procedure. Then you have gender mainstreaming, it's a 4-credit course. Why gender mainstreaming? So people will ask, why are you giving so much importance to women? Allocating money separately for them, and so on and so forth. People ask, but then to give an answer to justify it, one needs to go back to what in first year we taught, gender mainstreaming, because it requires a specific economic and social state movement to mainstream these issues which have become invisible. Women's inequality and their oppression was invisible. It was considered natural that women are like this, they're born like this, they will do only these certain things in life and then they will die. That is not how things happen. Neither do women want, or even men who are sensitive. They do not want this kind of life to be led by its citizens if they happen to be women. So that is why gender budgeting became very important. Gender mainstreaming. So Unit 1, origin and concept of gender mainstreaming, then paradigm shift and platform for action. This was Beijing conference outcome. You will be studying it in the first year itself, because how this entire gender and development discipline was conceived, conceptualized, developed, innovated, and how it became pro gender, or critical awareness about genders inequality in the society, required implementation, conceptualization of concepts like gender mainstreaming. So policy initiatives, block 2, global and national scenario, integrating gender into policy making process, international initiatives, UNDP, international initiatives with the World Bank, regional initiatives and national initiatives. Then you'll see that all these institutions, international institutions, are taking this seriously, and they are making plans and policies to gender mainstream their economies and societies. Block 3 is process of gender mainstreaming, then the nitty-gritty of how the process is undertaken. National and international opportunities, institutional development, mainstreaming gender in the informal economy, and sectoral concerns. Informal economy is very important, again, in economics, in national economy, to understand, because most women work in informal economy, because that economy uh, is supports casual work, supports low wages, supports insecurity of jobs and work. So most women, because of their gender situation, they find jobs only in this sector. But there are no guarantees of jobs or fixed wages or high wages or social security. Now, of course, social security is in force in the country. Then you have MGSC 004. This is the fourth course: Gender Issues in Agriculture, Rural Livelihoods, and Natural Resources, Resource Management. And the block 1 is Gender and Crop Agriculture. Then we move from the national, regional, uh, metropolitan understanding of our society to the rural areas. And we discussed the role of women in agriculture, access to resources, services, and institutions, differences in roles and activities, national agriculture policy for women. In block 2, you have gender and livelihoods and natural resource management. It's a very important block. So in Unit 5, role of women in livestock. So this is, you'll see how women actually generate their income. Where do they work? You actually see the location of their work. Unit 5 is role of women in livestock, access to resources, services and institutions, differences in roles and activities, natural resource management, NRM in Panchayati Raj institutions. Then you have block 3, gender and fisheries. You have Unit 10, role of women in fisheries. Unit 11, access to resources, services and institutions. Unit 12, differences in roles and activities. Then MGSC 006 deals with gender, resources and entitlements. The block 1 talks about debates in resources and entitlements. Gender, resources and entitlements genesis. You know that most women don't own private property. They are very poor that way. Women are basically propertyless, dependent the on the family where they get married or where they're born. Whereas most of the resources and properties owned by male members. This is also very important to understand. Uh, what are entitlements? You know, rights, women's rights to work, to earn, to own property, and so on and so forth. Unit 12, 2 is again structural approach, welfare approach, right-based approach, and participatory approach. This is very important. These are the philosophical basis for us to understand this situation of propertylessness, or inaccessibility of them to natural resources and resources of any kind. Then block 2, issues in resource and entitlements, land, property, individual gendered access to common properties. Some properties are also common, apart from private property. Unit 8 is gender issues in resources and entitlements like water, Gender issues in resources and entitlements in forest produce. You will understand how everything is open for discussion, because from everywhere women have been excluded in terms of owning or in terms of having easy access to these resources like water and forest produce and so on and so forth. Then block 3, gender and livelihood resources, talks about food security. You will learn in this course how women are such a great player in conserving seeds, in conserving food, in collecting firewood. They are the ones who keep on preserving and making life secure for the families and for the society. So Unit 10 is food security, then Unit 11 sustainable environment, then enterprise, impact of commercialization, economic globalization. So within this international framework where commercialization is playing havoc as far as natural resources are concerned, particularly uh, forests and mining has devastated the, the productivity of land in terms of livelihoods, and economic globalization has made our own resources open for global claim. So it's a very risky and dangerous kind of a situation where women have to function in such a way that sustainability is ensured, so that security, food security is not disturbed or its chain is not broken. Then MGSC 007, gender, organization and leadership. Here we study block 1, understanding organization, organizational types, structures and processes, organizational policies and practices, organizational goals, visions and mission, organizational diagnosis. Uh, it's the block 1. So when we go to study or types of organization, then we will see how people have organized, how women have organized, how state has created organizations, and how through these organizational structures it has been possible for women to sort of make some intervention in the uh, continuous change, global change in our economy, in our land situation. Then the concept of leadership, theories of leadership. I mean, women are not known to be leaders. I mean, just exceptions here and there. But here we are talking about leadership that women actually have been providing. You know, and so what are the types of leadership that you study here? Types and styles of leadership and its the gender dimensions. Then leadership in combating global challenges. Very serious issue here. Then block 3, gender, organization and leadership, gender distribution in organizations, entry, survival and advancement of women in organizations, barriers to advancement in organizations. You will see the difficulties that women face in coming up in the organizations at the level of management or level of decision making. Because if they don't come, then the decision is taken on their behalf by mostly men, and they are not supposed to be uh, thinking about gender issues as their top priority. So that way it becomes a very insensitive way of uh, holding leadership positions. Then block 4 is capacity building for leadership. Role of organizations in capacity building for leadership, that is to say, uh, providing education, skills, funds, all of that for women to have acquired new skills and run organizations on the basis of which they can effectively make an intervention and change. Then strategies for leadership development, auditing leadership practices and policies. Reviewing to how women's leadership can be built so that they can make policies, they can make an impact on policy making. Then MGSC 009, gender issues in work, employment and productivity. It's a very important course. It talks about gender issues in work, real major problems that women face because their work is defined by patriarchal structures. Their roles are given by society, which are not dominant roles, which are not roles by which they can very easily claim standardized good work, uh, you know, mostly performed in public sectors, where you can ask for equal wages and so on and so forth. Then the evaluation of women's work. Women's work is never valued adequately and properly. As a result, they always land up either being unpaid or paid poorly. Then the participation of women in pre-industrial and industrial societies, you will see how the modernization, industrialization in the country has also not allowed women to share equal space in terms of work. Block 2, women's contribution to national income. This is an eye-opening block. It will show you that the work that women do, which is not valued, also contributes to the national economy. The unit 4 is women in care economy. Most of the time, women are just providing care, and it is considered to be their work for which there should be no money. But the time goes, the labor goes into it, but not paid for mainly. Then women in shadow employment, their employment is always not the main employment. So how that shadow work is created so that their invisibility remains intact and nobody is liable to pay for the jobs that they do. Then job search, the indispensability of voice, organizing for social protection in the informal economy. And Unit 8 is towards a generative model of social protection, making the link to development policy. This is the social protection policy uh, has come into uh, existence because of the constant struggle and theorization by women of uh, their work, their contribution, and their importance. Then block 3 is gender and labor market segmentation. You'll see that even the labor market is segmented in such a way that women do not enjoy equality in terms of their contribution and in terms of the exchange value. Then gender differentials impact on labor market, wage differentials, social security, legal responses to work. All of this is now under discussion. Mm, Women's work is properly under focus now, and every bit of their contribution is now studied. And the legal responses also, women can, uh, because they have rights, constitutionally given rights, so they can take legal help as well if they are denied or they are sexually harassed in the workplace. Then MGSC 10 Gender and Entrepreneurship in Development. The concept of entrepreneurship. The women are also entrepreneurs. They are not only domestic workers or household laborers. So entrepreneurship, nature, types and levels, entry, survival and advancement in entrepreneurship, gender dimensions, entrepreneurship, Indian and global context, research agency and the block 2 is policies and provisions for entrepreneurship development, public-private partnership for facilitating entrepreneurship. It's a very good model. Private and public partnership is a workable model, and women have actually um, preferred this model because it allows them to also access some funds for their private work, their private businesses. Funding including microfinance and other support systems. These are the financial structures. Microfinance is a huge thing. Banks have provision for microfinance and giving small loans to women who want to start a business or they are continuing to do their business. Then funding, then management information system and its effectiveness in promoting entrepreneurship and supporting women's entrepreneurs. So support for women should come from society, civil society, market, state, uh, various kinds of intermediary organizations. Then block 3 is analysis of competencies and assessing potential entrepreneurs. So really locating the potential of women to not only perform domestic labor but also to do business. So identification of entrepreneur competencies, entrepreneur assessment techniques, identification and selection of potential entrepreneurs, and successful women's entrepreneurs case studies. So then you'll see that women actually have the capacity to do business, to make profit, to earn, um, and enrich society and enrich their families. Then block 4 is capacity building and entrepreneurship development, business opportunities identification and business plan preparation, designing and managing support services, providing follow-up support to potential entrepreneurs, training women entrepreneurs. They have to go to be trained because the market is becoming more and more technical. Money is becoming a matter of technique basically. So new things have got to be learned, and that for that women need training to handle uh, technology to handle computers, to understand softwares of accounting and auditing and so on. All of that is required to do business, as you know. Then MGSC 01313, Gender Training and Empowerment. Block 1 is Basics and Importance of Training. Introduction to Gender Training, Components of Gender Training, Training Tools and Methodologies, Becoming an Effective Trainer. Then Block 2 is Empowerment, Frameworks and Issues. So this is again about measuring empowerment problems, meaning conceptual frameworks and methodologies. So skilling women to become earners, be- take initiatives, sustain themselves in this area of making money. All these require training, studies, skill development, handling technology, all of that, and this is all taught in this course. Then uh, in MGSC 020, Gender and Financial Inclusion, which is a very important course again. So it talks about gender and redistribution of resources and wealth. So obviously, if the resources are not available to them, they are not they don't have entitlements, they don't have rights to private property accruing to them. Then obviously we require redistribution of resources, and this is MGSC 20. Um, uh, and then MGSP 002, Internship 2, Field-Based Research 2. This course is compulsory in the second year. In addition to this course, the student also have to complete eight of the 10 elective courses on offer. The student can attempt either field-based research project or internship based on themes drawn from the second year courses. The credit weightage assigned to MGS 3002 is 4 credits. Guidelines are provided in the Annexure 4. Details are provided in the handbook of MGSP 001. And also, this MGSP as a course has been uploaded on IGNOU, and you can always go through it, download it, read carefully. Research is we manage to get our students to do research work at MA level itself, because our courses requires practical outcomes. That is why you need to know how to make an effective research by understanding the tools of research. So this is from yesterday and today. This is the entire program of MA in Gender and Development Studies, with all these courses and the blocks and the units built into it. It is an extraordinarily rich course, and our students, when they study it, they find themselves not only enlightened and empowered, they find themselves a position also in the job market. So I end it here. I hope you people have understood the length, breadth, and depth of your MA program in Gender and Development Studies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Savita. Let us start discussing MGS 002. That is Gender Development Goals and Proxies. This course, specifically this Gender Development Goals and Proxies, is a 6-credit course. It has 4 blocks and 20 units. Yesterday, I think whether I have explained it or not. In IGNOU, I told you subject means we call it as a course, and each course we develop each course, and each course we develop each course blocks. Under each block, we will develop units. In a conventional university, you can consider unit as one lesson. These blocks and units we develop with the help of experts in a very logical manner. So if you look at the course 2, you could able to see that Gender Development Goals and Proxies, block 1 is on development phases and issues. After first, we talked about what is goals, significance of goals, what are all international organizations, why do they formulate goals, how these goals could able to address various development issues, whether these goals are integrated gender issues or not. Those issues have we have explained in unit 1. If you look at block 1, logically we have added. Second one is about educational goals. Third is about economic development, that is the enhancing economic resources. What are the resources available at the local level, how the women can augment those resources for the benefit of their own economies. Then self-help groups, microcredit, and livelihood. Then last one is regulatory frameworks. This is the block 1. Block 1 overall, um, it give you we have developed block 1 to give a meaning to the development goals. Block 2 is about gender, government and voluntary sector. There also we have 5 units. If you look at that, the like last block, the 5th unit is regulatory framework. The 6th unit, immediately we were talking about the global trends and influences. What are the regulatory frameworks? I'll explain a little later. Then from regulatory framework, what are the global trends and influences? Once we talk about issues at the global level, then automatically we need to talk about gender, democracy and development. Then what are the institutions? In the block 1, we talked about the international institutions. The block 2, we talked about the civil local level. The last unit in block 2 is about the service delivery mechanism. If you go further, the block 3 is about gender mainstreaming, and block 4 is about development with social justice. There is an integration between the course 1 and course 2. If you look at the course 1, we start with explaining the concepts in the block 1. After the concepts, we talked about how the emergence of gender and development as an approach, and emergence of gender and development as a discipline. Before we talked about the gender and development, we have introduced the various development theories. From how the feminists they critique the existing development theories, then we have introduced Gad. Afterwards, we talked about the gender and development and various tools related to gender and development, gender mainstreaming and issues we have discussed. Then in continuation of the course 1, the course 2 is about the development goals that I have explained. Let us start with concentrating on unit 1. If you look at the unit 1, we have the unit 1 start talking about what is development. Will you able to define development? It is very difficult to define what is development. It's a very contested term. As far as international development or global development is concerned, it is a concept. That concept lacks universally accepted definition, but everybody very lucidly they use the term development. And mostly we used this term in a very holistic and multidisciplinary manner. Even when we talk about human development also, it is part of the development. So when we talk about development, certainly we need to talk about governance, healthcare, education, gender equality, disaster preparedness, infrastructure, economy, human rights, environment, and issues associated with human development. When we discuss about development, certainly we could able to see that the development differ from location to location. Even that's why we have added one unit with regard to rural-urban divide. The development, if you look at the development from rural areas, certainly there is a vast difference between rural and urban areas. So development, it differs from national, regional, and local level. When you talk about development, certainly it is composed of institutions, policies, everything. But specifically, we need to understand that the concept of development, the process of development, widely discussed and talked immediately after the World War, because in the Second World War, both developed and developed nations, they have affected in one way or the other. like a developing nations. During that period, we call it as third world countries. They need to address various issues, including infrastructure and various issues related to their own population. Thus, the international institutions like United Nations, World Bank, they have certainly facilitated these countries to take appropriate measures and appropriate policy measures, and they try to make these countries to formulate certain policies based on the existing development theories. Okay, so the United Nations, it is the very significant institutions. It started in 1945. Now it has it has completed 75 years. The UN Charter in itself clearly stated that the members of the UN declare their faith in the fundamental human rights and in the equal rights for men and women. Thus, UN action for the advancement of women has taken four clear directions. So, apart from feminist, UN also very significant organization to bring gender perspective in the existing process of development. In a charter itself, it has clearly pointed out that it wants to promote legal measures for women. It wants to mobilize the public opinion and international action. And research and training is a very important component as far as UN is concerned. Then direct assistance to disadvantaged group. Like for example, to address these various development issues, United Nations has organized various conventions and, for example, conventions for development from 1949 to 57, specifically for gender and development. Related to that, there was a conventions related to the suppression of the traffic in persons and the exploitation of the prostitution of others. Then ILO Convention on Equal Remuneration. Then Convention on the Political Rights of the Women in 1952. Then Convention on the Nationality of Married Women. Apart from these conventions, there was a convention against discrimination in education. That's why the second unit, it talks about the specifically educational goals. Then you could able to see that convention on consent to marriage, minimum age for marriage and registration of marriage in 19. All these conventions, all the member countries, they were part of these conventions. Once they were part of these conventions and once they agreed to implement these the resolutions of the conventions in their own country, these nations, that is country, even including India, is part of the most of the conventions, and it has agreed, it has signed the resolutions. Once it has agreed and agreed the resolution of the particular conventions, these countries, they are bound to implement conventions resolutions in the form of public policies, or they need to formulate appropriate laws to implement the convention's resolution. For example, Convention on Consent to Marriage, minimum age for marriage. Government of India also has formulated law for minimum age for marriage, consent for marriage, and registration of marriages. Now, once you get married, once anybody get married, they need to register their marriage. All this is so at the international level, UN has taken various measures to address the development issues, specifically the issues related to women, and they have organized convention and conferences at the international level, and the member countries, they actively participated, they accept the resolutions of the conventions. Once they accept, it is the duty of the countries to implement those resolutions. These countries, they implement those resolutions in the form of laws and public policies. And then you must be wondering, how will they know that the particular convention's resolution have been implemented? So this once the convention is over, Twice in a year, the UN will organize the meetings. In that meeting, the member countries, they need to submit their report to the United Nations. Apart from getting reports from the specific countries, the civil society organizations in any specific country, they will also prepare the report and they will send it to the UN. That is very important. For example, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is CEDAW Convention in 1979. This CEDAW Convention specifically uh, adopted in 1979 by the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. It is the International Bill of Rights for Women, and it came to force in 1971, and 186 countries are the members of the convention. The CEDAW conventions is to reduce and eradicate discrimination against women and to promote gender equity. For example, as per CEDAW conventions, the conventions defines discrimination against women as, I quote, any distinction, exclusion, or restrictions made on the basis of sex which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or access by women, irrespective of their mental status, on the basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. I unquote. This clearly establishes the agenda for action. See, any distinction, exclusion, restriction made on the basis of sex, the countries, member countries, they are not supposed to discriminate any individual based on the sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on the basis of equality of men and women, um, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. If you look at these conventions, if you look at all these conventions, it has convened with a specific purpose. The purpose is to address the existing inequality between sexes and to bring equity and equality in the society. Apart from these conventions, the CEDAS, the United Nations specifically has organized 4 international conferences. The first one is that Mexico City in 1975. Like for example, her second one is in Copenhagen, third one is in Nairobi, and last one is in Beijing. Look, when you look at these 4 international conferences on women, um, like it through these conferences, the UN brought feminists from all over the country to evolve certain policy perspectives to include or to mainstream gender issues in the public policies. That is the main reason. For example, uh, in the if you look at these United Nations conferences, this unit specifically discusses the role of international institutions, equity. Mm. If you look at that, during the first decade, actually, every decade the UN has declared the specific decade for development. I will explain later that in the first 3 decades, from 45 to 55, 55 to 65, and 65, the work of the United Nations on behalf of women focused primarily on the codification of women's legal and civil rights. That's why CEDAW conventions and various, like a minimum age for marriage, registration of marriage, various conventions related to legal and civil rights, and they want to codify the women's legal and civil rights and gathering of data on the status of women around the world. With the time, however, it became increasingly apparent that laws in and for them were not enough to ensure the equal rights. Okay, that's why the struggle for the equality entered in the second stage with the convening 4 international conferences. So, first 3 decades, UN concentrated mostly on to codify or to document the existing legal and other rights, civil rights for the women. Then they realized that not only convening the international conventions to codify, they have to go beyond that. That's why they have organized 4 international conferences. We have explained about these 4 international conferences. After Beijing conference in 2000, UN General Assembly, it has reviewed the 4 international conferences under the theme Women 2000, Gender Equality, Development and Peace for 21st Century. That is the thing. This special session, UN session, provided the opportunity for governments and civil society to share good practices and examines current challenges and obstacles encountered in the implementation of Beijing Platform of Action. It also made possible to give new momentum to political commitments to achieve women's empowerment and gender equality. These are the certain conventions. Then 2000 also in the UN, there was a Millennium Development Goals. Then 2000, now we are talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. These were explained in Unit 1. As I have already mentioned, we have arranged these units in a very thematic manner. Once you understand, once you know about the existing development goals, then you could able to specifically concentrate on various development goals in a specific sector. First, let us see what are the development goals as far as gender and education is concerned. So the unit 2 titled as Education, Development Goals and Upgradation of Skills. If you look at this unit specifically, has written with the objective of describing the literacy and education and status of women in India. Literacy and education. Literacy is one of the specific indicators to know the status of women. If you look at the Census of India data, always they collect the gender segregated manner. How many women are literate, how many men are literate, that we used to collect. So, like looking at this certain data, literacy rates we have analyzed. We have collected the data from Census, National Sample Survey Organization, National Family Health Survey Organization. All these things, even Census also, age-wise, we have explained in the unit. So, second one is the explain the initiative towards improving women's education at international and national level. What are the initiatives taken to address women's education at international and national levels? Then discuss barriers in education. Then analyzes various strategies, include skill for facilitating women's access to education. First, we talked about the literacy and educational status by using the data on literacy. We have explained. Then we have initiatives for gender equality in education. Like we have traced the historical provisions and programs. Like if you look at the efforts of Government of India, India has a long history of organized education, and we can trace even like early centuries also. And but sometimes this education system in the early centuries may not provide access to everyone in the society. Once the Government of India got an independence, it has recognized the importance of education and provided the pivotal role in empowering women. Women's education also they have concentrated. Like for example, in the Article 45 of the Directive Principles of State Policy as per Constitution of India, which states that the state shall provide free and compulsory education to all children under 14 years of age. Then 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 and the recent Right to Education Act has made elementary education a fundamental right for all children in the age group of 6 to 14 years. All of us, we have explained more about the Right to Education Act in some other units also. Then idea of treating women as equals and providing social justice was also reflected in the constitution, which guaranteed equality to everyone irrespective of their caste, sex and religion. So after we India got an independence, education became the responsibility of the state. You all must be knowing that in a constitution we have a central list, state list and concurrent list. In the constitution, whatever the subjects written in the central list, it is the whole responsibility of the center. If the particular subject is written in the state list, it is the responsibility of the state. Then if it is written in the concurrent list, then it is the responsibility of the both state and center to formulate the policies and to implement the particular subject. Okay, so like if you look at that, India, government of India has constituted various committees to address the issues of education and to improve the women's education and to mainstream the girls' education in a way of improving enrollment ratio and addressing the and providing necessary facilities to make the girls to continue their education. That is all the various measures have been taken. For example, in 1964 to 1966, the government of India has constituted the Kothari Commission on Educational Reform. That is the last commission to set up. For example, as per Kothari Commission's suggestions, we need to set up the statutory school education. For example, set up the state boards of education, and we need to ensure the equality in education and setting up the statutory school education commissions. Then, for example, all of you are all from gender and development. You must be know about the Committee on the Status of Women in 1975. The committee has examined the constitutional, legal, and administrative provisions related to the status of women. Okay, the report also brought out the dismal scenario of women's education and recommended co-education as a long-term policy to promote equality of opportunity. Okay, then like a national policy on education 1986 and its program of action 1992 made a significant contribution to the education system of our country. And in general, it has made a significant contribution and specifically it stressed the equality of women in education in particular. So all this we have explained. And what are the interventions in the in a table form? We have given the interventions and steps taken. For example, enrollment of girls, continuation of girls in school to reduce the dropout rate, improvement of quality, promotion of gender and social equity issues, then teachers' motivation, getting older out of school girls back to schools, all the. Then what are the barriers? Barriers include mental blocks, parental aspiration attitudes, poverty, inadequate school facilities, shortage of female teachers, gender bias in curriculum, vulnerability of adolescent girls. These are the some of the barriers. All these barriers over a period of time, this was addressed by the various agencies, including government and other agencies. And what are the education and development goals that has we have like a millennium MDG Millennium Development Goals? And as far as India is concerned, also we need to focus on gender parity in development agenda. Development and agenda includes um, education, then strategies towards bringing gender equity, then how to upgrade the skills. So you could able to uh, see that in that particular unit we have not only traced historically about the women's status in the education, we have clearly discussed the efforts of the government and various policies and programs and education policy of the government of India that was discussed. Then next unit 3 is about the enhancing economic resources and the SHG movement. This unit has written in a specific objective. The objective is first to what is empowerment. We need to define empowerment, explain the importance of women's access to economic resources, analyzes the strategies of women's empowerment, and evaluate the impact created by SDGs in enhancing economic resources, women's economic resources. So, like if you look at this unit, we have broadly covered about women's empowerment and strategies for women and empowerment. Specific strategies we have discussed in this unit, that is about formulating a self-help group movements and how the microfinance movement has started in India, and what are the government programs for the promotion of self-help groups and SHG bank linkage program in India, then microcredit need and importance, impact of self-help groups and bank linkage program, and what are the success of self-help groups that has also been discussed there. If you look at this unit, the unit started with defining what is empowerment. According to Naila Kabir, the empowerment is as the process by which women take control and ownership of their lives through expansion of their choices. As per her, it is the process of acquiring the ability to make strategic life choices in the context where this ability has previously been denied. Okay. Like in that empowerment process, whether women have an access to economic risk. See, empowerment is a process. When we talk about empowerment, certainly we need to talk about the power and disempowerment. So if we say that empowerment is a process, then one individual, they may be disempowered. Through the certain process, they become empowered. To become an empowered, according to Naila Kabir, we need to have access to resources, and we should have an opportunity to exercise their choices. And if one individual could able to exercise exercise their choices, and if they can have an access to the resources, then they can bring certain changes in their life. It's like that's why she was talking about, Naila Kabir defined empowerment as the process by which women take control and ownership of their lives through expansion of their choices. Choices means if the women, like for example, if the women could able to decide on their life, like what to study, where to study, if they have a certain land and other resources, if the women could able to decide how to utilize those resources, and when to get married, and children, how many children do they, or whether to have or not to have children, all these life choices, if one individual could able to make, then according to Naila Kabir, they are the empowered. So, according to her, the core elements of empowerment have been defined as agency. Agency means the ability to define one's goal and act upon. As an individual, if someone is talking that they could able to exercise their agency means, like if anybody could able to define what is their life goals, to achieve that life goals, if someone could able to act upon it, then we could call them as empowered. Okay, so self-esteem, self-confidence, and power structures, if you could able to address the existing power structure, these are the part of the empowerment process. So empowerment can take place at a hierarchy of different levels. Individual level calls also one could able to get empowered. Household level, one could able to 3 4 women together they could able to get empowered. Community and societal level also they could able to. This specifically this unit is talking about the women's empowerment at the community level. When you talk about the community level, self-help group is the important tool to empower women at the community level. For example, we have given table 3.1 in that, like a individual, household, and wider community and national context, and how the what are the obstacles to access economic financial. If you take about the finance, women lack access to bank. Most of the women, they may not have an access to bank financial services in their own right. At the household level, men's, usually male members in the household, they have a control over the resources, specifically with regard to financial resources. Community level, the community have a perception as men as the breadwinner, they should have a control over money and loans. That is the existing perception at the community level. That is the finance. When you talk about economy, women were undertake various activities which produce low return. For example, most of the women, they are mm, part of the like certain economy, do the whatever like a informal economy, they were part of the informal economy which produce very low return. And Professor Savita Singh has explained about the informal economy also. Certainly that has that has produced very low returns. And women may not be able to actively participate in the mainstream economic activities due to the heavy domestic workload. When it comes to household, certainly we could able to see the gender-based division of labor, and unequal access and control over land and labor inputs, and unequal control over joint household produce. Whatever jointly produced at the household, certainly if it has a market value of then certainly male, they try to control over the joint produce. When it comes to community level, like even though we have an equal pay act, like whatever the work we both men and men perform in the same work, they are supposed to get the equal pay. Still there is a existence of wage differences. Okay, that is the first thing. The second is about the women were underpaid in many of the activities. Then women like certainly locked up are locked in low paid jobs. Stereotypes of appropriate roles for women in the economy. Most of the time certain activities do are we are stereotyping. Like all of us must be knowing that like certain activities, like for example in a hospital, doctors can be both male, and then even within doctors also, like certain specialization, cardiology, neurology, mostly male preferred profession, gynecology, and certain specialization highly specialized by the female. Like if you look at the data on nurses and primary school teachers, it was heavily occupied by the female. Have you ever think about it, why this gender differences in roles? Not in a private space, public spaces followed again and again. If you look at certain roles performed by the women at the public spaces, we could able to come to the conclusion that it is the extension of care activities. Care activities mostly performed by the female at the private spaces. So they considered certain roles are related to care work, that is the mostly female are highly suitable for that. And what happened is that they ended up in paying very low. That is, then women lack access to markets for inputs and outputs if mobility constrained due to social norms. Second, what are the socio-cultural constraints or obstacles? You could able to see that women are not literate or educated, girls' education is not prioritized. At the household level, you could able to see that women, they have a limited role for women in household decision making. Some it is not prevalent, but still polygamy was prevalent. Now it is not that. Then violence towards women. Then bank and financial institutions do not view women as an um, potential market. Women's mobility is constrained due to social norms. Political, legal, then certainly politically, women, they like the existing socialization process clearly talks about the talks about or like they clearly see the political space is mostly masculine space, the male are the suitable for it. That's why if you look at the data on women's representation at the parliament and state assemblies, certainly we have a low representation. That's why the government specifically wants to improve the women's representation at various levels, and they have passed the women reservation bill. Then household level, women lack legal rights to jointly owned household asset. Then like for example, women lack political positions that I have explained. These are the various gendered obstacles to access the economic resources. That is the main reason that there was a policy to form the self-help groups, and through the self-help groups the government wants to provide the certain microcredit facilities to youth. So then if you look at the unit 4 is discuss the need for microcredit and microfinance interventions, explain the types of microcredit providers in India, then analyze the functioning of self-help groups in India. These are the thing. Then last unit in this block 1 is about regulatory frameworks. You all must be knowing that we are in a market economy. The post regulatory frameworks of the post 1995 international trade, primarily there is a legal and institutional structures of WTO, the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization was formed in 1995. After formation of World Trade Organization, there was a new trade arrangements, okay, including we could able to see that there is a Uruguay round agreements, then general agreements on trade, tariffs and trade, then general agreement on trade in services and trade related intellectual property rights. These are the certain trade related international efforts, trade arrangements that was implemented. If you look at these trade agreements, certainly we need to know that what are the basic implications of the tools of international trade regulations, like general agreement on tariff and trade, general agreement on trade in services, then trade related intellectual property rights. What are these, like, what are the basic implications? Then analyze the impact of these regulatory tools on gender, like what implications it create in the lives of the women. Then trace the linkages between law norms pertaining to gender and international trade. Explore the relationship between the feminist theories and international trade and law. Then point out the necessary conditions that should be fulfilled to realize the socio-economic rights of women in and through international trade recognitions. These are the objectives of the unit. Then we have explained about the these international trade agreements, then like human rights of women and international trade laws, then feminist theoretical categories in exploring the gender bias in international trade agreements. Then measures undertaken for molding the World Trade Organization regulatory framework to alleviate the gendered effects on poverty. These are the some of the topics as discussed under this unit. So you could able to see that block 1 I have explained. Now let us see block 2.